Well, good morning. Thank you again for taking the time to watch this video. I want to talk to you this morning about changing or altering an agreement of purchase and sale by way of adding somebody else as an additional purchaser or by changing the purchaser from one person to another. I've covered some of this ground in past videos, but it continually came up again twice this week, and I thought it would be important to clarify. So I want to talk to you from the seller's perspective or from the agent's perspective who is representing the seller. You get the question asked to you, can we add somebody to the agreement of purchase and sale? And if I'm representing the seller, I'm going to say, sure, I don't have a problem with you adding additional people because that adds an additional covenant. I'm not giving anything up. The people who are on the agreement of purchase and sale as buyers are still there. I'm just adding somebody new. So it requires an amendment in all probability, and the consent of the seller as well as the buyer, and the signature of the new person that you're adding as well as the existing buyers on the contract, but it certainly can be done. What about changing buyers, changing from one buyer to another? Well, there's a number of ways that can be done, and each one has its own ramifications. For example, it can be done because provision is made in the agreement of purchase and sale. In other words, the agreement of purchase and sale can either say John Doe in trust, or it can say John Doe or assignee. Makes a difference which way you say it. If you say John Doe in trust, then John Doe has the right to put somebody else there, but John Doe is committed to fulfill the contract. He's buying it in trust. If, on the other hand, you put John Doe or assignee and the seller accepts it, the seller is agreeing to the fact that John Doe can assign it to somebody else, and the seller's already consented to that, so that can be done. So it can be there in the provision if you add that. But I think if you're representing the seller, you want to be very careful, especially when it says or assignee, because we'll talk about that in a few minutes. Also, the contract itself can be assigned in the way of a flip. And the Ontario Real Estate Association, in fact, has Form 145, which is designed to handle the assignment of an agreement of purchase and sale. And that's where I've got an opportunity to sell my contract at a lift, and the buyer's taking over, stepping into my shoes, if you like, and taking over. It doesn't require the seller's consent or even knowledge. Now, if you want to do that, you can't very well show the property unless the seller consents to cooperate. And why would they when you're making $80,000 or $100,000 kind of that they could have made and lost that opportunity to do so? But if the buyer is willing to step into your shoes and take over your agreement of purchase and sale, you can assign it. But understand that you remain liable for the fulfillment of that contract. If the buyer suddenly breaches, doesn't show up, you've got to be prepared to close. And then you can go after the sub-buyer for a breach of that contract, that assignment contract, but you're liable to the original seller. That's who you contracted with. Okay? But you can also do it by amendment. And remember, as long as it's legal, anything a buyer and seller agree to in writing can be done. And so you can take an agreement of purchase and sale with John and Jane Doe, and you can say we're going to remove John and Jane Doe, and we're going to add these new people. Now, there might be a legitimate reason to do that. It could be, for example, that it was in the name of two children who were buying it, or a son and daughter-in-law, and they couldn't get financing. And so in order to do that, you want to put the parents on title instead of the children. They're going to handle the financing, and at some point in the future, they're going to transfer title over. So a very valid reason to do that. If I'm representing the seller and I'm going to allow that, I'm going to want to make sure that the people who are stepping in as the new buyers have at least as strong a covenant as the people I'm releasing as the old buyers. And bear in mind, you have to do an amendment, and the amendment has to be signed by all the people who were originally on there and are signing off, the people who are now being added and signing on, and the sellers who are agreeing to the whole thing. So, can be done as long as it's done properly. And then we get to the last one, and this is the one I really want to draw your attention to. This came on an agreement of purchase, or at least an offer. It hadn't been accepted yet. And it was shown to me, and I've seen this exact clause a number of times, and so it's being used verbatim. And I'm telling you that if you are representing the seller, you should never allow this clause as it stands to remain in the agreement of purchase and sale. Let me read it for you, and I'll put it on the screen. The buyer shall have the right at any time prior to closing to assign the within offer to any person, persons, or corporation, either existing or to be incorporated, and upon delivery to the seller of notice of such assignment, together with the assignee's covenant in favor of the seller, to be bound by as buyer, the buyer herein shall named shall stand released from all further liabilities hereunder. Why do I have a problem with that? Because it says that I can assign, first of all, I can assign it to somebody who has no credit, who has no strength of covenant, but I can also assign it to a corporation to be formed. And that is generally what we call a shell corporation. And I mean by a shell corporation that it has no assets. If I go to my lawyer and I set up a numbered company, that numbered company has no value, no assets, it doesn't own anything. And I am assigning my contract to this numbered company, and I am remaining completely free from any obligation or liability once I make that assignment. So if this numbered company fails to come to the table and close, now the seller's got access through the courts to the deposit. But if the seller wants to sue the buyer, he's wasting his time and money. Because even if he gets a judgment against a numbered company, the numbered company has no assets. So don't let that clause stand as it is. And it comes back to the same thing as if I put in the original agreement of purchase and sale or assignee. If I have either or assignee at the buyer's name, or if I have this clause here that says that the buyer will be released, I want to stroke out that last line that says the buyer shall be released from all further liability hereunder, and I want to instead say, however, the buyer, John Doe, shall remain personally liable for the fulfillment of the contract. Now, if once it's closed, nobody cares. But if he's not willing to maintain that liability or that commitment, then why would you as a seller want to sign that clause? Be very, very careful, because you're going to find situations, especially in a rapidly increasing and an unstable market. At some point in time, if the market shifts, property values drop, somebody wants to walk from an agreement of purchase and sale, you want to be very careful that you didn't catch these kind of things and give your client bad advice and put them in a spot where they really can't defend the contract. I hope that makes sense. I want to, as I said, I'll put that clause on the screen, and I'll show you where you need to cross it out, and be very vigilant about that if you see that coming in, and you will see it coming in from time to time. Thank you very much for investing the time and watching this video, and I'll talk to you again next week.